Welcome to City Church's On-Demand Messages. My name is Josh, and we're so glad that you're tuning in whenever and wherever you're tuning in from. In fact, it's possible that you either stumbled across this online or somebody shared this, and you are leading it maybe for the first time. If you have any questions or want to know more about who we are, we'd love for you to visit our website. In fact, if you can even plan your first visit on our website. If you've got kids, we have a kids ministry specifically for them. You can plan your visit. You can go ahead and check them in, learn more about what that will be like. Maybe a middle or high school student, we've got you covered. And so if you have any questions or anything that we can do for you, please just check out our website. Today's message is going to be very special, and we're thankful that you're tuning in. It'll be anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes. And so if we can do anything for you, please let us know. But enjoy today's message.
Good morning. That's what I'm talking about right there. Hey, my name is Warren, and one of the pastors here at City Church, and I am so thankful that I get the opportunity today to continue in our series called Built to Last. We started this series last week on Built to Last, and this series is wrapped around relationships. So whether you're single, dating, whether you're married today, this series is for you, it's for me, and being reminded of this, okay, that relationships get stronger when they are done God's way. That relationships can be built to last when they are done God's way. So whether you're single, you're dating, you're married, relationships as you move forward get stronger when they're done God's way. In a relationships, balance and progression is important. No matter what stage of a relationship you're in, Jesus shows us how to deepen bonds and better love people around us. And so as we look at this series, it's shaped around this verse in Philippians chapter 2 and verse number 5. In relationships with one another, okay, all relationships with one another have the same mindset as Jesus Christ. So we're building relationships that last around the mindset of Jesus Christ, how he lives and who he is. And so we understand that mindset, this word here, is the basis of how you look at things. So the basis of how we're going to look at relationships is the basis of the mind of Christ. And so as we've walked through this, the first week, we've understand there's a mindset in your relationship that can lead to life, a lasting relationship between those that we have relationship with, which also means there's a mindset that could lead to death. And so what we've done is we've moved forward and we've understand that there's 5 major bonds in a relationship. And the first one this past week, Josh talked about know. And he talked about the way that God knows us, the way that he seeks after us. And he talked about the fact that this is where we have to start, and we'll get there in a second. But there's know, right? We truly must know someone. And then we have to move into, can I trust them? Can I rely on them? Can I commit to them? And can I touch them? So if you're single this morning, this is the progression that God wants you to build on, okay? So it starts here. It's kind of like the fader of a soundboard. We've talked about how it's almost like a soundboard. So Josh last week put the band on the stage, and he raised the volume of just the vocals and took the instruments out, and we noticed the importance that it exists. So, but if you're single, you start here and you move across the board. You must know someone, trust them, rely, commit, and then you get to this space. And then we talked about the fact that if you're married, all right, if you have a marriage, that there needs to be a balance in all of these things. There must be a balance because we have to understand this. When a relationship gets out of balance, whether we're starting here or here, when it gets out of balance according to what God wants us to do, it never self-corrects. It just doesn't just happen on its own. Right? If the band is playing and our awesome tech team is running sliders and something is not loud enough or something's too loud or there's feedback, it's not just going to be like, the board's not going to magically be like, let's fix this. No, they're going to have to actually adjust it and balance it back right. So this morning, as we move into our next piece, I want to take you on a journey, okay? When my wife and I were on our honeymoon, wait a second, hold on. I'm not just... If you're thinking, okay, just hang tight. Okay, we're not at touch yet. When my wife and I were on our honeymoon, sorry guys, my wife's gonna hate me later for that one. My wife and I were on our honeymoon, and we got married in Savannah, born and raised in Savannah, Georgia. And our first part of our honeymoon, we got the opportunity to a family had this place in North Carolina we went to stay at, which was really cool. But the trip from Savannah to North Carolina, we take Interstate 95 all the way up to North Carolina in the Raleigh area. And if you've ever taken that trip, there's something you've probably come across before. And there's some billboards on 95, and those billboards in many cases look like this: south of the border. South of the border. And there's these signs just mile after mile after mile, and they're cool. Like, this sign has a crashed up car on the sign, and it says smash hit. And so as you're moving towards south of the border, so I grew up in Savannah, and my aunt and uncle live in North Carolina, and so we always, as kids, we always were like, can we please stop? We want to stop at south of the border as kids, because it just looks so cool. All these signs, every like 15 to 20 miles they show up, and it tells you how many miles till you get there, kind of like Buc-ee's these days. It tells you how many miles it takes to get there, and so there's this like excitement that existed. So guess what? We never stopped as kids. When we got married, we went on our way to North Carolina, we got to make the decision, and I was like, we're stopping at south of the border. We're stopping. We're going to see what this is all about. Can I tell you something? There's a reason that place has barely 3 stars on TripAdvisor. It's a big old tourist trap. These signs had this expectation, and you're like, this place is going to be awesome. Just south of North Carolina, right in South Carolina, on the border. We get out and we get in there and we're like, what in the world? All of those signs for this. I think sometimes this is what marriage can feel like. All the billboards are like, this is it. This is the stop you want to be at. Just 10 more years, 8 more years, 5 more years, 1 year, 6 months. And you stop and you get there and you're like, wait a second, this is it? It's the reason that 50% of marriages end in divorce in America. It's the reason that marriages in America last only 8 years. It's the reason that marriage rates are decreasing in America. Because the billboards were saying something, but the stop said something different. So how do we move this? How do we match the experience with the billboards? We have to have balance. We have to live out this relationship that's built to last according to what Jesus mimics and shows us. So one of the things that we have to have balance in, that we have to get to in our lives as single, if we're dating or we're married, we have to have trust. Trust. And trust, if we were honest, as we read those statistics, 50% of marriages end, they only last 8 years. One of the things that makes relationships so difficult is trust. 60% of marriages that end in divorce, it's related around trust. Trust is broken. Listen, no matter what, let me tell you something, trust will be broken in relationships. Dating, marriage, it's going to be broken. And you're like, Warren, nah, you don't know my marriage. I can tell you, you're probably not telling the truth. Why? Because we're humans. I'm not perfect. I know my wife might think I am, but I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect. I am a human being born into sin. It says in Romans that we all have sinned. Every single person in this room. I'm a pastor. Guess what? I sinned yesterday. I did. Yeah. And the day before. Because we all have sinned. We're not perfect. So trust is going to be broken in all relationships. Say, Warren, listen, man, you don't know. Okay, let's take this for example. Wives, there's something going on in your marriage. Next to where your husband sleeps, there's a sock. And he says, I'm going to get it. I promise. I promise I'm going to get that sock. You go to bed last night, and there's the sock. And you kind of give him those eyes, you know. I'm going to get it, babe, I promise. And here you are 18 years later, and that sock is still there. And so every time your husband says, I'm going to take care of it, you're like, yeah, right, that sock's been there for 18 years. Nothing on the to-do list is ever going to get done. And guess what? There's a little bit of trust that's been broken. Husbands. It's okay, husbands. I got something for the wives too. This past week, your wife came home, and guess what she had? A bag. And this is the bag that she didn't have a bag like any other bags. And she said when she came in the door, this one's different. And men, let's be honest, you're like, all bags are the same. They hold stuff. What do you mean it's different? No, this one's a clutch. What? And your wife says, no, I promise, this is the last one. And guess what? Guess what? I got it on sale. It was regularly $100. I got it for $95. I don't need another one, I promise. Do you believe her? Nope. And the ladies are like, I wouldn't believe myself either. They come out with new stuff all the time. And Amazon, I can get that thing in 2 days. Trust is broken a little bit. You say, Warren, those seem so minimal, but the truth is right, they shape our trust. They move the fader of trust up and down. So how do we make sure that this fader in our relationships doesn't get out of whack? Because trust is important. We see the word trust actually used in the New Testament. This is the part of the Bible that we see after Old Testament where we see Jesus come to earth. And we see that the word trust is actually used 241 times. So trust is something that is important to those of you here that follow Jesus. It's an important thing. If you're here this morning and you don't know Jesus, thank you for being here. But I think that you would even admit that trust in a relationship is an important thing. But as we build off of last week, knowing and trusting are different. So trusting is this. Trust is a feeling of security and confidence in another person, right? I can know someone, I can get to know them, but then it moves into a feeling of security and confidence in another person. You see, our feelings of trust don't come from just what you know, right? The feelings of trust that I have for someone in a relationship, they don't come from just what you know, but what you decide to think about what you know about someone. Let me say that again, all right? Trust is not just know, but it's what you decide to think about what you know about someone. Many times those married in this room, you would be honest, maybe sometimes it feels like you have two spouses. The one that's in your head and the one that's in your home. Because what happens, sometimes you get these tinted glasses. Don't make fun, these are my regular glasses. I wear these all the time. I like to call these the sunshine glasses. Because when I put these on, even if it's kind of yucky outside, it looks like the sun is glowing. I don't wear these guys. If you see me in my car, it's not me. I think that sometimes, if we were honest, it's easy for us to get lost a little bit. And sometimes this is the view we get of the relationship that we're in. And we do. Because the incredible thing about trust, right? The incredible thing about trust is that we do want to think the best about the other person. And we hope and we pray that the other person thinks the best for us. But sometimes the glasses come off, don't they? And things don't always look so sunshiny anymore. The one that you thought you could trust, who they actually are, seems to be different. Take, for instance, as we experience and try to understand how to build trust, how to rebuild trust. Take, for instance, the story of Samson and Delilah in the Bible. And so in the Old Testament, we find the story of a man who had incredible strength. And God placed him in a place of great strength and put him in a place to judge Israel, almost like a king of Israel. But he had some things that just weren't the best decisions and choices. One of those specifically was related to relationships. And so he falls into love with this woman named Delilah. And if you have heard the story, the goal for Delilah was not the best for Samson. We actually see that she was offered money by those that oppose Samson to help kill him. And so we pick up in the story, and he has just met Delilah in the story in Judges chapter 16 and verse 6. And she asked a no question. We talked about knowing someone. And so verse 6 of Judges chapter 16, it says this. So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me where your great strength lies. That sounds like a great question, right? Oh, she's trying to get to know him. That's so sweet. Sounds good. But listen to the rest of this passage. The rest of this verse says this, and she says, tell me your strengths and how you might be bound that one could subdue you. You think that he'd be like, all right, something's not right. I don't think I can trust this person. I don't think I can trust her, because he knows the enemy is out to pursue him and out to kill him because of his strength and who he is. And his now vision of what things should be is jaded. Why is it jaded? Here's why. Because if we go back to Judges chapter 16, verse 1, same chapter of the Bible, this is what verse 1 says this in Judges chapter 16. Samson went to Gaza and there saw a prostitute, and he spent the night with her. That was not a slumber party pajama spend the night, okay? Just in case you were curious. Here's the crazy part. That is not even Delilah. It's a completely different woman. Samson was starting not on this side of the fader, but Samson was starting on the touch side of the fader. He had that thing all the way up. So when Delilah asked him this question, hey, can you tell me your greatest strength, and can you tell me how you can be bound? His idea of trust was jaded. His ability to truly trust was jaded. Why? Because trust is a feeling, and touch is the entirety of our feelings. Physical, emotional, mental. It can jade our feelings when we start on this end, especially our trust, which is a lot of times put out of whack. And what happens, and this happens for Samson, touch went up, and then he was like, oh, I can trust her. His relationship became jaded. That is why there must be what? In our dating relationships, in our marriage, there has to be a balance. There must be a balance. So the question we have to answer today is, how do we find this balance? How do we grow in trusting in our relationships with our spouse? In dating, as we're single and we're searching, how do we do this? How do we build trust? And if it's broken, how do we rebuild trust? In order to first build trust, I think we have to understand this. We have to have the right foundation. Because why? Because trust stands and shatters depending on its foundation. Trust stands and it shatters depending on what the foundation of it is. You say, Warren, what do you mean? Before we build trust in relationships, we have to have a solid foundation in someone else. We've talked about shaping our direction towards relationships around the same attitude that Jesus Christ possessed. And so in Luke chapter 22, we actually find Jesus. And Jesus is in this space in his life where he's about to go to the cross. If you're like, what does that mean? That means he was about to step in a point of death to give his life for you and for me. And he knew what was coming. And so where was his foundation in his relationship with God? It was found in trust. And so we pick up in Luke chapter 22, and we see this. Luke chapter 22, verse 42. And this is Jesus' words. He says, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And so his relationship with God was built on trust. And how do we know that? Because as we look at this passage and we look at this word will, not my will, he's saying what one determines or wishes is done. So not what I determine or what I wish is done, but God, yours. What your will is. So Jesus is not saying what I determine to be done, but you. My trust is in you. My foundation and my trust is in you. To the single, to the dating, and to the married person, let me help us move towards this. Your trust must be built on the one before you build it on someone. Why? Why? Why in my relationships, Warren, and in these 5 things when it comes to trust, why must it be built on the trust of Christ first? What did we say in the beginning? We're all human. So when that relationship and trust is broken, where am I going to go? If every ounce of trust I have in my life is on my spouse and something happens, if I don't have the right foundation, that's why I said it shatters. For some of you in this room, I know this for a fact, and I'm sorry. Trust has been broken, and so you have now the ability to trust no one. I'm sorry. You've been hurt. Can I tell you that the first step in moving forward and trusting relationships is that you have to have the right foundation? That's why in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. It's the only place you can go with all your heart and you can trust. And then it says, lean not on your own understanding. Let's be honest, in our relationship somewhere in here, maybe you're trying to lean on your own understanding a little bit. And it's shattering because you're trying to trust in something that's not working and you're leaning on your own understanding. And God is saying, listen, I want to give you a firm foundation, whether you're single, whether you're dating, you're married. Trust here first. Trust in the one before you trust someone. Your sense of confidence and your sense of security is ultimately tied to your confidence in someone first versus God first. The reason God could be our first foundation in trust is because he will never fail. He's not. I'm going to fail my spouse. I'm going to fail Lindsay. I'm sure that probably happened this week. She cleaned my dresser off yesterday. There was probably at least one sock on that dresser. I'm going to be honest with you. I like to keep my socks on before, and then right when I get in the bed and they get toasty, I take my socks off. There was like 3 pair on the floor the other day. I'm going to be honest. I'm not perfect. So I need a place. I need someone who can be that foundation who is. My wife's not perfect. I need someone who I can place my foundation in. From there, trust then is built stronger as we begin to know those that we are in a relationship with, as we begin to pursue dating, as we date, as we're married. Our knowing someone leads us to trusting someone. And so the way that we build this is we start with Christ. And then what happens is we find this in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. This is probably a chapter that was maybe read at your wedding. How many of you this was read at your wedding? Anybody out there, 1 Corinthians chapter 13? I'm going to be honest. It says this is the love chapter. It says, love believes all things. Love believes all things. Babe, I'm going to put that sock away, I promise. Well, she's believing me. She is. Believes means to put confidence in, right? To place confidence in someone that what they're saying is true and what they're saying they're going to do. You see, the best marriage is the one with 2 people trying to fight to assume the best in each other. That's what trust is. It's I'm assuming that you have the best intentions for me, and you're assuming that I have the best intentions for you. Trusting that you are each looking out for each other's best. This type of trust is necessary before we move along and sustain in our marriages. So this morning, if you're like, Warren, how do I build trust? How do I work on this? Well, you continue to know, and then you begin to believe the best. But I want to recognize the fact that we started with we're humans, and the truth is in this room, there's probably more than likely marriages where trust has been broken. Where trust was given and then trust was broken. Can I first just be in this space where we can be honest and we can recognize that that's hard, but we also can recognize that we serve a God who can bring about healing and that can restore marriages to the strongest they've ever been because of his goodness and his grace and his faithfulness if we're willing to step into this space to rebuild trust. Know this today that no marriage is perfect. I know social media sure makes it look like it. But me too. When you're putting pictures, on the internet, you put the best ones, okay? You don't lay them out on the floor and you're like, all right, that was not a good day. Let's show everybody that one, No, you pick the best ones. And so there's this jadedness that exists. Let's all be just realistic in the same room and just know that marriages aren't perfect. And so trust has been broken in every marriage in some capacity in this room. Marriages face broken trust. So how do we rebuild that? We know what to fall on. We know that that foundation has to be built on Christ first. But let me encourage you with this first step today. There has to be forgiveness. Say, Warren, you don't know. You don't know what's been done. You don't understand how much trust I had. But trust cannot be rebuilt if forgiveness is not given first. Forgiveness is past-oriented. Trust is future-oriented. So before you move forward to the future, you have to deal with the past. You have to start with what has happened, and you have to offer forgiveness. You see, because forgiving others that have broken your trust is actually biblical. It's a biblical thing. It's something God calls us to. Trust is not. Trust is something that we grow in. It's something that we move forward in how we love. Forgiveness is something that, as a follower of Jesus this morning, even if you don't know Jesus this morning, it's something that brings healing. This is what we see about Jesus. We're having this mindset in relationships. When we talk about relationships, the mindset of Jesus, and it says this in the book of Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32. It says, be kind to one another, tenderhearted. And here it is, forgiving one another. Why would we forgive others? Why? Just as God in Christ forgave you. The mindset of Christ is that even though we have not been perfect, even though we have made mistakes, that he forgives us. And so the first step that we have to follow to rebuild trust is we have to offer forgiveness. Even when something was done to us and we didn't deserve it. In the same way that Christ gave forgiveness to us. In order for rebuilding to take place, forgiveness must come first. And as we forgive, we have to then move towards rebuilding. Now, what are the things that get in the way of rebuilding trust? I think the first thing that gets in the way is revenge. You say, well, what do you mean by revenge? I will trust them when they know how I feel now. When they feel my pain and hurt, then I will trust them. I know that feels right. But this morning, if you know Jesus, you know that's not who he is. Resist the urge of revenge, and then I'll trust. I think the other thing is that a lot of times those in this room, if you've broken trust, you are there and you're like, I just want things back to normal. But you have to understand the pain and the hurt that's been caused. I want things back to normal, because when trust is being rebuilt, when trust has been broken, you have to understand that you're on your spouse's time. You're on their time. You have to allow for healing. You have to allow for God to do something. You can't just look at tomorrow and be like, all right, let's get back to normal. No. There are things that have to be done in order for trust to be rebuilt. I think the other thing we have to be careful of when we want to rebuild trust is we think maybe that there has to be no change. We can just keep going as is. We don't have to change anything. Can I tell you that's not true? Trust is not going to be rebuilt if there's no change. I don't understand. They want my passwords. Well, yeah, you broke trust. Give them to them. They won't let me hang out with so-and-so anymore. Well, yeah. You broke trust. Yeah. You can't live in a space where you want to earn trust back and you're not willing to change something. And then to rebuild it, we have to go back. If trust has been broken, we have to start back here and we have to begin to go back to know. We have to take time, space, give of ourselves to know each other. To know us just like God knows us, so that trust can begin to emerge. So let me give you this as we finish today. This morning, if you're single and you're pursuing or you're dating, here's your challenge. I would ask you to evaluate. Evaluate. You say, Warren, you mean like, what do you mean by evaluate? Like I'm taking notes and stuff? No, here's what I'm saying, okay? All right? Watch their actions, not their words. Listen to the young people in here. Can I just tell you something that I think you need to know? If someone is saying to you and you're dating, if you love me, you will, please run. Run. Because that person does not deserve your trust. Get away fast. Because those are words, not actions. So the person that's married today and there's not a break in trust, my encouragement to you today would be this: to believe the best. Believe that God is doing something and continuing to grow your marriage, that you can be an example to those around you. Believe the best in each other. Look to a space that says, you know, I want the best for her. She wants the best for me. And this morning, if you're married and trust has been broken, man, can we be reminded that there is hope through the name of Jesus? And the first thing you have to do is you have to forgive. You have to forgive. You have to start there. It's where Jesus has started with us. You have to forgive. Forgiveness has to be offered. And then you have to begin to rebuild trust. Don't seek revenge. Make sure that you find yourself in a space where you just don't think times are automatically going to get back to normal. Don't be in a space where you think, no, I'm not going to change anything. And then lastly, seek counseling. Seek counseling. You say, Warren, I don't know if we can do that. Is there anything that can help us get to that space? Yeah. Go to citychurchgriffin.org/care. You'll see a form on there that you can fill out. And as a church through this series, we've said this, that if you and your spouse are looking for a place to start, that as a church, we will take care of your first session of counseling. Because we believe in what God can do more than anything and what God can do in your marriage. So we want to take that first step with you. As you build trust, don't let the little things paint your trust picture. He might not pick up that sock. She might bring home a fanny pack this week. Yeah. But allow the big things, as you get to know each other, allow the big things to catapult you into building trust.